The subject matter in some of these stories may be considered sensitive by some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, which I've gotten quite a few lately, so thank you, go to astheravendreams.com and hit the button to submit your story. And of course, thank you. This happened to me and a few of my girlfriends one spring break a few years back. We were in our last year of college, and being consistently broke throughout it, we decided we wanted to go wild for spring break and have a great time before we graduated, as we may not see each other for some time afterwards. So, when we weren't studying or in class, we were working as much as we could and saving every penny to make sure we had enough for a hotel room and a little extra for food and shopping. Surprisingly, we made it, and we had a great plan set up for us to have some much needed fun. We were planning to drive down to New Orleans. Thankfully, Sydney had a pretty new car, and that we all trusted to get us there. We were also lucky to get a hotel that was close to a popular and busy part of the city, so we could easily walk around and back to said hotel. So, with everything planned, we counted down the days and hardly slept the night before we departed. The next morning, Sydney, Ava, and I crammed our suitcases into the trunk, filled up a few bottles of water, and stuffed a backpack full of snacks and instant coffee from the rec room, and we took off. We listened to cringy, cliche, girly road trip music, and it was probably obnoxious when we had to stop to fill up and use the restroom, but we were in a zone, and it was an amazing time. When we finally got there, though, I don't know if we really were still excited and wired, or if we were just delusional, but we were ready to check in and go have a great time. But once we got unpacked, we all crashed. Sydney and I were out pretty quick, so Ava tried to watch some TV but said she passed out soon after. Anyways, we woke up pretty late that night, so we decided to order in and just make a nice night of it. When our food arrived, I went to get it when they called us. We were all in our pajamas, which for me consisted of a tank top and basketball shorts and a sports bra since I was leaving the room. As I got to the lobby, there was a guy leaning over the front counter while the receptionist was on the phone. I was grabbing the pizza when I noticed the guy had looked over at me while I was handing over the cash, and once I made eye contact, he smiled at me. Not gonna lie, I didn't dislike the attention, though. I was the chubby friend. While the other two were more fit and attractive, I often wore baggier or looser clothing to hide my belly, which is also why I was wearing basketball shorts. So, needless to say, I smiled back. He was attractive too. He was wearing jeans, cowboy boots, and some band t-shirt that I don't remember. My favorite part was his long blonde hair. It was a little past his shoulder with the curls that I wished my hair had. So, definitely my type. I didn't know what else to do though, so I just continued to walk back to our room. I got back with the pizza and explained to them what had happened. They gave me grief that I should have gotten his number or something, and insisted on going out there to find him. After pleading with her not to, Ava walked out of the room to find the guy. After a while, she came back in and slapped down a napkin on the bed with a scribbled number on it and his name, which was Alan. She'd actually gotten it for me. They teased me for a while and said I should talk to him and invite him out with us tomorrow night, so I told them I would consider it. I stashed the number in my pocket and we enjoyed the rest of our night. The next day was going to be our day. We planned to be there for the weekend, so this was our full day to do whatever we wanted. We did some shopping, went to a popular local place for lunch, and then hung out in the pool to chill before we got ready for the night out. While we were in the pool, we talked about where we wanted to go and planned on hopping around to a few different places. As we were getting out and I was wrapping a towel around me, I saw Alan walking in the pool room wearing trunks and holding a towel. Again, he looked me up and down and smiled and said hi to me. I smiled, not knowing what else to do, and watched as he walked past me and got into the hot tub area. My friends pushed me to go sit in there with him, but I was way too nervous to do that. I wouldn't say that I'm really conservative in my ways, but I only had one serious relationship, and I'd been out of it for some time, so I was still very shy about initiating anything. And with that, I walked back to our room with them. We all showered, munched on our leftover pizza, and got ready for the night out. We planned on going to a bar that was pretty close by at the recommendation of another person staying at the hotel, and decided to start there first. We had a great time there. Doing shots, being loud, I'm sure, but just your typical girls' night out. It was the next place that we decided to check out that things started picking up. That was definitely more of a party place. More drinks and dancing took place there, for sure, and then they made jokes that my boyfriend was here. Sure enough, in walks Alan. At this point, it can't be helped. He spots us, and he's waved over by Ava. He's just standing by us, bobbing a bit, and asking us how we're doing, where we're from, things like that. Then, he offered to get us all drinks. They didn't hesitate. So we got some free drinks and danced and talked for a while longer. He then suggested that we hit up another place he knew of, and we all agreed. It looked more like an old home or apartment style that was turned into some kind of makeshift bar. I know from explaining it, it seems like it could be really sus, but it looked pretty legit. There was a bar, and they asked us for ID. There was a dance area, booths in the back, just all of it. So, we were cool with it when we got there. It was more of the last place, though. More drinks, given to us by Alan, dancing. Alan started dancing with me, grabbing my hips and whatnot, which was unexpected, but I let it go. Then, he started to get a little bit more aggressive with it. He would try to grope me in different places, and being the shy person that I was, I didn't really know how to react to it, so I would just move in a weird direction where he couldn't grab me anymore, and make some kind of comments like, and slightly shake my head or something. I wasn't intending to play hard to get, but I'm also not interested in one-night stands. So, as the night continued, the groping continued, and so did the drinks. However, then the sickness started to show its ugly face. I started feeling nauseous and dizzy, yet my friends weren't. I figured since we were all doing the same shots, then I must just not be holding mine in well. I didn't want to ruin their fun, so I told them how I was feeling, and said I was just going to go back to the room. They offered to go with, or at least walk me back, but I told them I'd be fine. Then, Alan offered to walk me back. I again told him that he didn't have to, but he insisted. I gave up and agreed to let him walk me back, and I told my friends that I would see them later. We walked back, had some small talk, and he asked me if I was okay. I told him that I probably just didn't eat enough or something, and said that I would be fine. I got up to our room and thanked him as I turned around, and then he pushed himself on me and started kissing me. I pushed him away, and I told him I wasn't ready for anything like that, as it was way too fast. That's when I saw the unexpected side of him. The anger on his face was obvious, and he made a comment about, What the hell was the point of all those drinks then? Don't you think you owe me? At that point, I reached into my pocket, pulled out a 20 that I had, and told him to have a good night, and then shut the door. The rest of that night, though, was a total blur. I remember going to the bathroom, getting sick, and then I crawled into my bed and passed out. I remember having a weird dream that was almost like sleep paralysis. I'd never experienced anything like it before, but I remember seeing a dark figure above me, and I felt like my body was being pulled and moved in different directions, but it wasn't by myself. Then it disappeared, and I didn't remember anything else until I woke up earlier to my friends. They were desperately trying to wake me up, and I remember going in and out, thinking they were just messing with me, but I could hear the concern in their voice, which finally got me to wake up. But I was still very groggy, and my head was pounding. Then, they started explaining what was going on. After we had left, Alan hadn't come back yet, and it had been over half an hour. That was plenty of time for him to drop me off and come back. They were kind of worried because they knew that I wasn't the type to just let him in, and especially not without telling them. They thought maybe he just didn't return because he wasn't interested in them, but when they tried calling, it seemed to be ignored, and then went straight to voicemail the second time. They then became worried and started to leave. Then, as they were leaving, there were a few guys distracting them and trying to get them to stay. They finally got out of there and rushed back to our room, and when they got there, they opened the door and saw a figure standing in our room in the dark. They flipped on the lights and immediately started yelling as they saw Alan standing in the room with his pants off. He quickly ran to the door where Sydney tried to stop him, but he shoved her out of the way, and as she was trying to get up, he got out the door and was gone. Sydney said she tried chasing him down the hall but lost him. However, she was screaming, so it got the person's attention at the front desk. All of this, of course, was told to me afterwards because I had obviously been drugged. That's why I didn't remember any of this, why I felt sick, and even worse, why I felt like I was experiencing sleep paralysis. It was him. He was trying to undress me. He didn't get far, though, when they walked in on him. From there, the receptionist called the police, but he was long gone. They took their report, and then when I finally came to, they questioned me. I had to go to the hospital, though, to make sure I was okay. I just felt bad, and I was sitting there thinking that I ruined our trip, whereas my friends felt awful for ever letting me go alone or getting his number. I think we all explained to each other back and forth plenty that we don't blame each other. Unfortunately, the guy was never caught, and Alan was most likely not even his real name, as they didn't even have anyone checked in there under that name. We still have no idea if it was a fake, or if he was even staying there. I'm a lot safer now, and I don't dare go anywhere by myself, or at least not with strangers, but to Alan, or whoever the hell you were, I hope we do meet again, because this time, I know that I'll have the upper hand. I was a weird kid growing up, and I easily got way too attached to people that showed any interest in me. I think part of it was that I was an only child, and with both of my parents working all the time, I clung to anyone that paid attention to me, liked anything that I was interested in, or was even proud of the work that I had done. It was easy for me to make friends, but difficult to keep them as I know that I could be overbearing. I've worked on myself a lot since then, and I've gotten better, but sometimes I still struggle. Anyways, This is what led me to get close to one of my teachers. It was in middle school. He was our social studies teacher, Mr. J. He made history interesting, though. I struggled at times with other teachers when I couldn't understand something, and they would just refer me back to the textbook. He was actually kind and patient when I asked questions, though. I was typically afraid to ask during class, so I would ask him after it was over, and he was always willing to answer them. It was a nice change of pace. I remember at the time, I was very interested in the Cold War, and I had so many questions. Most of them were outside of the realm of what we learned about, or what was covered, so the fact that he was into the conversation with me, and giving me good books to look into, only made me appreciate him more. Over time, I found myself spending more time after class and after school in his room and talking. I also learned he was good with math, and he helped me with my homework there, too. I pretty much looked to him as a father figure. As a guy myself, my father worked a lot, but I never really felt like I lived up to his standards. So I loved the attention from Mr. J, and how he put me up on a pedestal, telling me how intelligent I was and how I was sure to go far. Anyways, I had a decent time in middle school, and I had to make my way to high school. During our graduation, I went in to hug him, and instead he shook my hand. They had a ceremony for completing middle school here. Then, I was off to a bigger and scarier world. High school was fine for the most part, though. I made friends with a few people, but I never really had one of them that was super close to me. For the most part, it was the friends you talked to at school, but never outside of it. I may have run into a few of them at a store or something, but that was about it. There was one girl in my neighborhood that I was close to, but she was homeschooled, so I only ever saw her when I was home, of course. I also had a few teachers I was cool with, but nothing as close as I was with Mr. J. I tried to find someone to cling to like him, as I wanted that connection again, but it never really happened. High school was even more confusing for me, as I began to realize that I was gay, and the girl from my neighborhood was the only person I was ever comfortable enough with telling, but she made me feel like it was normal, and that there was nothing to be ashamed of. I slowly worked on myself during this time to learn who I was, and what made me the way that I was so that I could be more outgoing. Of course, you can only do so much on your own without a therapist, and when your parents just think you're weird, they just ship you off to some camp for boys to become stronger, I guess. So, during spring break, instead of getting to chill at home and be comfortable and happy, they sent me off to some camp thing for boys. It wasn't Boy Scouts, but was more so for those with special needs. Yeah. Anyways, I gathered my things and my dad dropped me off at the rec center with the rest of the people. I started walking on the lines in the parking lot to keep myself entertained when I heard a familiar voice. I looked up to see Mr. J talking to one of the other boys. My mood completely did a 180, and I ran over to talk to him. This time he hugged me, and it was the best feeling. He hugged me tight, like my grandmother did, but never my parents. It was something that I had missed. He asked excitedly if I was here for the trip, and I confirmed, nodding. He said he was going to be part of the leadership team, so I was going to get to spend 4 days with him. I then told myself that this was going to be a lot better than I would have ever expected, and I even helped him get everyone in line, the bus packed up, and all ready to go. We got to the location, and I again helped everyone get set up. We talked about some basic survival stuff, like certain plants we could eat, and we helped start the fires, things like that. And the first 2 days went fine. We played some kind of kickball game, and I was on the same team as Mr. J, so he always celebrated with me when I got a goal and just made me feel valued. I loved it. It was the third day that everything changed for me. We would be going home the next morning, so this was a day for us to choose what we wanted to do and just have a day of relaxation. It was later that evening that I decided to walk around and see if I could find anything that I could take home as a memento. I ended up at a small creek or runoff that had a small bridge that you could walk over. I decided to sit there and watch the water, as there were a few ducks in it trying to clean themselves. After a few, I heard someone walking up to me and looked over to see Mr. J approaching. I waved him over and he sat down next to me and asked what I was up to. I told him I was just watching and trying to clear my head, as I was actually upset about having to go back home. He talked to me about how I was feeling lost in high school, in what was only about half an hour, maybe, and he made me feel normal. He made me feel like I was important, and that I was going to be able to make it through just fine. I thanked him. I told him that his words really meant a lot to me, and he said that I meant a lot to him. I didn't know how else to react, so I hugged him and got a little choked up, as I told him that he was like the father I wished I had. That's when his tone and manners started to change. He said, "Is that how you really feel about me?" But his tone just seemed off. I paused for a minute, and I confirmed what I said. I don't remember his exact response, but he basically said that I meant a lot to him, and that he missed seeing me all the time after school. He went on to say that he was glad I was there because he was hoping to see me when I was older. Mind you, I was 16 at this time. Then he mentioned how hard it was to wait for me. I leaned up at this point to look at him as I noticed that his hand was on my zipper. I didn't know how to react to this. I never really learned about this kind of thing, or even if this was okay. This was someone I trusted and cared for, so it was alright. Right? Thankfully, my brain was overloaded, so my instinct kind of kicked in, and I jumped up quickly, running away. I went back to my tent, zipped it up without saying a word to anyone, and just cried. I stayed there for the rest of the night, and when anyone came up to my tent, I told them I just wasn't feeling well. We packed up the next day, and I avoided everyone as much as possible. Thankfully, he seemed to avoid me as well, but yet he was all smiles and laughter. Within an hour, he'd completely destroyed me and was still over there having a great time. I went home and I was quiet for a while, not knowing what to do or if I should tell someone. I mean, who would believe me? Did it really happen? Was I just overreacting to something? My neighborhood friend could tell that something was wrong, though, so she finally got it out of me. She told me that I needed to tell my parents or the school counselor immediately. I was terrified how they would react, but I did finally tell my mom. She was a lot more understanding and sincere than I ever expected, though. He was arrested, and I never saw him again, thankfully, but I wasn't the first kid that he had done this to, sadly. I just hate that it happened to any of us. I already didn't feel normal, and this just screwed me up even more. Thankfully, though, I have a great therapist now, and I've become a lot more stable with my emotions and who I am, but to Mr. J, I'm glad that we will never meet again. This happened to me back when I was around 10. I remember a lot of it because it was terrifying, but some of the details are gone. At the time, my mom was a single parent. My dad wanted nothing to do with me, I assume because I didn't even know he ever existed. Then my mom had another kid with a different guy, and they split up. My mom was the only one that worked, though. I remember he always stayed home with me and my stepbrother until they split up. When he moved out, he would take my stepbrother with him, but would say that I wasn't his responsibility. So I was left by myself at times. It usually wasn't long, so I would walk to the back door, let myself in, and wait an hour or so for my mom to get home. This would change though on holiday breaks, like Christmas or even spring break. My mom didn't have anyone nearby that could watch me, and she didn't have the money to pay for a babysitter, so I would be left alone for 6 to 8 hours by myself. I was given rules though. I was not to answer the door for anyone because she would have a key and she wouldn't knock. I wasn't allowed to answer the phone except at certain times. She would call at exact times and would answer by saying, "It's Mama," before I would talk so that I knew it was her. And since we had thick curtains, they were to stay closed at all times. Other than that, it was the whole no touching the stove or microwave rules, of course. She made sure that I had plenty of accessible food that didn't involve cooking, like pre-made sandwiches, Lunchables, juice, just things like that. I didn't really think much of it other than, okay, I get to play, eat, and sleep as much as I want. And that was the end of it. So, this took place when I was home alone on one spring break. My mom prepped my lunch, went over the rules again, and left, locking the door behind her. I had my breakfast while watching cartoons, and that probably took an hour or two because, I was a child, so I was easily amused. After a while, I went back to my room to grab some toys to bring them to the living room to play with, while I continued to watch TV. That made up most of my day. Sometimes I would get out my coloring stuff, or give my toys a bath. I had these colorful soaps, and I always wanted to use them. So I would do that in the bathroom sink. Anyways, one of those days, I was playing and I decided that I needed flowers. I think that my dolls were getting married or something like that. I don't quite remember. I was going to color flowers, but then I couldn't cut them out because I wasn't allowed to use the scissors while I was alone. So, I decided I would go pick the flowers in our yard. I thought I would go out the back door, pick a few flowers, and then quickly run back in. That way, no one would even ever know. So, off I went to pick some flowers. But then, I thought, I needed some dirt to put the flowers in, so I ran back to get a cup to put dirt in. As I was filling the cup, I noticed the neighbor next door was outside watering her flowers. She noticed me too. She waved and smiled at me, and since I wasn't supposed to be outside, I just smiled and quickly ran back inside. I thought it was a pretty smooth move at the time, as no one ever came over or called, and my mom never found out about it either. So, the days continued on as normal from there, until a few days later. I was playing in my room when I decided that I needed rocks. Look, kids' imaginations are crazy. I specifically wanted the rocks that we had out front because they were flat and smooth. I was going to make them into some kind of structure again for my dolls. So, as I had done before, I would run out there, make sure no one was around this time, and grab a few rocks and go back in. I opened the door and looked around, and no one was there. So I grabbed my little purse and walked out to start gathering some rocks. While I was leaning over picking out the rocks, I heard the gate open. It was metal, so it had a squeak to it when you moved the handle. I looked up to see a woman that was not my mom coming in. She smiled and started to say something for me, so I immediately ran to the door shouting "Mom" to make it seem like I wasn't alone, and then I shut the door and locked it. The lady then walked up to the door and knocked, and I just laid still on the couch, waiting for her to leave. After a few more knocks, she did finally leave. I peeked through the curtain to see her get in a car that I didn't even notice in the driveway and drive off. I thought I cut it close on that one, so I told myself that I wouldn't go back outside, no matter what. However, I didn't even have to do that. While eating my lunch the next day, there was a knock on the door. I was scared that it was the same lady coming back, so I sat still waiting for her to eventually leave. After a few more minutes and not hearing any more knocks, I proceeded to peek around the curtains to see if she had left, when I was greeted to her face trying to look in as well. I nearly screamed when I saw her, but I think that I scared her too. It was definitely the same lady, though. She motioned to the door, and being caught at this point, I kind of thought, what choice do I have? I remember feeling like I was just caught doing something that I wasn't supposed to be doing, so the only option I had left was to confess. I opened the door, and she said that she wanted to talk to my mom. She looked like a nice lady, though. I remember she was wearing a dress or a skirt with a vest over it, and she had her hair pulled back like my mom. In fact, she reminded me a lot of my mom, which at least made me feel a little better. I told her my mom was busy, though, and that she couldn't come to the door. That's when she started laying into me. She said, "Are you sure she's home? You're not lying to me, are you?" I told her no and said that she was just in the shower. She then pushed her way past me into the house and said that she would wait for her to get out. I again told her she couldn't because I wasn't supposed to answer the door while she was in the shower. So she turned to scaring me. She said that she knew I was lying to protect my mom because I wasn't supposed to be alone. This, of course, caused me to be more alert because I was just hearing that I was going to be in trouble. She said she was there to arrest my mom for leaving me home alone, and I started crying. She started asking me more questions about when she would be back, and the crying got louder and uglier until I was begging her to not arrest my mother. She said she wouldn't arrest her if I went with her instead, and then my mom could pick me up when she got off work. I thought, if I could keep my mom from getting in trouble because, let's face it, I had messed up, then I would do it. So I agreed to go with her. She told me I could take my backpack with whatever I wanted in it, so I ran to my room, grabbed my favorite doll and book, and I headed out the front door. I was still very scared and sad, thinking I was going to get in trouble when my mom picked me up. When I got to the car, I began to wonder how my mom was going to know where we were, so I asked her if we should call her before she knew. That was probably her mistake, though. She was opening the back door when I asked this, and she very quickly and dismissively said something like, "She's not going to know because you're not coming back. She's a bad mom." So I started crying again, and I was even more scared. I don't remember what all I said, but I do know that I was nearly screaming, bawling, and pleading with her to let me stay and see my mom again. She kept telling me to shut up and to get in the car, and that's when the old lady next door came out. She was waving and smiling and was asking what was going on here as she walked closer. The woman started to become irritated at this point. She said she was taking care of me since there were no adults in the house. The old lady was smooth as can be, though, and responded back with something like, "Now, Katie, I told you I would be right back, didn't I?" I was confused and still crying, and all I could do was muster out an apology. She then explained to this woman that she was watching me, but had to run back home to get something, and then she apologized for leaving me alone. I don't know what she did, but this woman then let go of me and shoved me at the neighbor, and she said she would be back if I was ever caught alone again. I stood next to her as we watched the woman drive away and nearly burn out of the driveway. Once she was gone, she asked me if I was okay and suggested I go back home. I started running back home when I noticed that she was following behind me and up to the front door. Right before I was going to shut it, something told me to let her in and that I was going to be safe, so I invited her in. She then told me that I was okay and could go play, and that she would wait there for my mom to get home. I made my way to my room, and after lying on my bed for a few, I could hear her talking. I looked out of my room and I saw her talking on her home phone, so I went back to my room and I think I actually fell asleep. Obviously, something like that can wear a kid out. When my mom got home, though, it was another whole scene. I woke up to my mom gently shaking and rubbing my arm and crying. She then hugged me and apologized, and so did I. As you may have guessed, that lady was definitely not with CPS or anything of the likes. The neighbor, Barb, had caught on that I was home alone, so when she saw me out, she was just making sure I was okay. She noticed the lady come over the first day, but since she left, she didn't think much of it. But when she showed up the next day in her same ugly beat-up car, not looking like an official vehicle in any way, she felt like something was wrong. And when she saw me crying while walking to the car, she felt the need to confront the situation. When we got back inside, she found the paper with my mom's number on it and called her to let her know what had happened, and my mom came home shortly after that. I don't think my mom ever reported it, though, because she was worried if anything would be done about her leaving me home, so we just never saw the lady again and hoped that we never would either. However, Barb did start watching me after that. She came over to our place so I could still play with my stuff, and everything went fine from there on. Barb has been a part of our family ever since, actually. She said I reminded her of her own granddaughter that she rarely got to see since they lived on the other side of the country now, and she was glad to have the company, since she lived alone. I was, and am, still incredibly thankful for her being so watchful over me, even when I never talked to her, because that honestly could have saved my life. Who knows what that woman was planning to do with me that day. So this was a collection of stories that occurred during spring break. Spring break is that time of year where sometimes people go a little crazy, sometimes they don't, sometimes they just take the time and do nothing. Of course, if you're a person that actually has a spring break, that is. A lot of us adults don't have a spring break. We just kind of don't stop doing what we do. Anyways, yeah, spring break's time of the year where we go crazy. Some people go crazy, I guess. Road trips, parties, camps, such stuff, as these stories were about. Yeah. I really don't know what to say here. I've never had a spring break thing or experience and never really done anything on spring break. I guess we've taken road trips, but they weren't spring break oriented. They were just like, hey, let's take some time off and do stuff in April, because that's whenever both of our birthdays are. So it works out that way. But yeah, is what it is. Anyways, Hopefully you all enjoyed. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. Please leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing if you like what you heard. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Another thing that's appreciated is everyone who sends me their stories, as well as those on Reddit who let me use their stories. A huge thank you to each and every single one of you. Really, just really, really thank you. We're going to add a little extra thing here. If you guys would, if you're listening and get to this point, if you have a Twitter, consider following me on Twitter. I post a lot of things over on the Twit, on the Twit page, on the little Bluebird page. My handle on Twitter and Instagram, actually, is at @RavensDreamYT. Links are down below or up on the banner of my channel. Also should be up there. Yeah, just follow me over there. I post a lot of things. Sometimes updates, sometimes memes, sometimes pictures of Tyler or Mitzi or CJ, just animal pictures, cats, mostly. I say mostly, and I think I've only ever posted pictures of Tyler there, really. So, anyways. Yeah, I hope you all have a great day. Hopefully you all enjoy your spring break, or enjoyed your spring break. Schools here are just on spring break, so very topical this video is. And yeah, I hope I see you on the next video. But of course, my beautiful friends, until then, sleep well.